Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So inshallah, continue from page number 100. Praying inside the Kaaba. So he said it's valid to pray both the fard and the nafil prayer inside the Kaaba or on top of the Kaaba. So as we know that normally for namaz, for prayer, we face in the direction of the Kaaba. This is a common, children misunderstand this generally. They think they're worshipping the Kaaba. We don't worship the Kaaba, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Kaaba means cuboid. Right? So the shape of the building is a cuboid. And that's what Kaaba is. The Qibla, we normally say, right? That is the direction that we face. And the Qibla is the direction of where the Kaaba is, so the direction of prayer. So he mentions here that if someone was inside the Kaaba or even on top of the Kaaba, then they can read nafil namaz or they can read the fard namaz. The next point that they mention here is that even if they done Jamaat, that Jamaat will be valid. And now obviously it's quite difficult to even get inside the Kaaba, but traditionally there weren't that many people who attended Umrah or Hajj. Even if you look at pictures from like 20 years ago, they would literally, everyone would be able to touch the Hajj Aswad as they were around the Kaaba. So everyone would be able to touch the Kaaba, and it wasn't that many people there. But now obviously we have people in the millions, so you might seem that why are these rulings mentioned? So if you're inside the Kaaba and you're reading namaz with Jamaat, which direction do you face? Or if you're inside the Kaaba generally, where do you face? You can face any direction inside the Kaaba. And even if it's different than the Imam, so imagine the Imam standing there, facing there, you could be facing there. As long as your back is not towards the Imam's face. Why? Otherwise it would be considered that he's behind you. But if you're standing and imagine the Imam is facing this direction, you're standing and you're facing that direction, the other guy's face, it still be valid, right? As long as your back is not facing the Imam's face. But obviously these are just real scenarios that hardly would ever happen. But there's some people who do get the opportunity to go inside the Kaaba, and this does happen. Another thing they mentioned here is, if the Imam is inside the Kaaba, this could very possibly happen as well. This could generally happen. If the Imam is inside the Kaaba and you are outside the Kaaba, can the Salah happen? Yes, it can. Okay, so it could possibly happen that, that when you go to Umrah or Hajj, that the Imam decides to lead the prayer from inside the Kaaba. If that does happen, then your Salah is valid. And the next point about the Jamaat, when people are, normally the rule is that you have to be behind the Imam. If your ankles are in front of the Imam's ankles, when sometimes two people read namaz, right? And they're standing side by side. Imagine that my thumbs are the ankles, right? They're standing side by side. That's the ruling how you stand with the Imam. So the Imam and the first follower will stand next to the Imam, almost shoulder to shoulder, you could say. But he'll be slightly behind the Imam. If his ankles go in front of the Imam, his namaz will break. So if you're praying with one more person next to you and you're the Imam or you're the follower, if your ankles as a follower go in front of the Imams, any point during that Jamaat is invalid. Okay, so the ankles need to, but sometimes some people stand right, one saf behind. That's wrong as well. You should be almost next to the person, but as long as, you could say half a step behind him. So your toes will be equal to his ankles in a way. Right? So that's the easiest way to understand. So they mention here that when you make a circle around the Kaaba, you're on the other side of the Kaaba, you might be closer than the Imam on the other side. Right? And obviously now, as we see the pictures of Haram Sharif, when the Jamaat is done, it's like a circle around the Kaaba. If you're on the same side as the Imam, you have to be behind the Imam. If you're on any other side, you can be closer. So sometimes you might see a picture, an aerial view, where half the people are around, three sides people are making a close circle to the Kaaba, and the fourth side people are standing quite back. That's because the Imam on that side is standing behind But the other people, because they are on the other sides, they are slightly, they can be in front of the Imam or closer to the Kaaba than the Imam, as long as they are not on the same side as the Imam. So if you ever went to Umrah or Hajj, then make sure that if you're in the Madaf area around the Kaaba and the Imam's on your side, then make sure you're standing behind the Imam. So that's the simple, brief chapter on praying inside the Kaaba. Next is Qaza Namaz. So making up any namaz which you have missed, any prayers that you have missed, making those prayers up. So the first paragraph, it addresses a person who is Sahib al-Tartib. Sahib al-Tartib is a person who hasn't missed 6 prayers, who hasn't got 6 Qaza Namaz from the point of being Baligh. So imagine a person became Baligh and namaz became fard on him at 12 years old. From that age, he's been reading all his namaz, and he hasn't exceeded 6 namaz that he's missed in a row, or he's missed. Then that person is considered Sahib al-Tartib, a person who's got the flow of his namaz going, right? If that person missed Fajr, imagine he missed Fajr, he can't read Zohar until he's read Fajr, right? So if you miss less than 6 namaz in your whole life, in the Qaza namaz, then you can't read the following namaz until you've read the previous one. So imagine you overslept, you missed Fajr and Zohar. You can't read Ascent until you've done Fajr first, then Zohar in order as well. And you read Fajr, then you read Zohar, and then you read Asr. Only in 3 circumstances you can break that order. One, they mentioned that if you've done more than 6, which will be a lot of people who missed, like, who never prayed namaz when they're 13, 14, 15, and they've got years of namaz to make. So that person, he doesn't have to do in order. You can read 50 Fajrs in one go as Qaza, then 50 Zohars, 50 Asrs, like that. It's perfectly fine for that person. Another one is, they mentioned here is, imagine he missed Fajr and Zohar. He woke up, it's Asr time. And if he has sufficient time to read Fajr, Zohar, then Asr, then he needs to read all 3 in order. But if he thinks by the time I read Zohar, I'm going to miss my Asr, then he reads the Asr. Then he can break the order, because otherwise the next one's going to go Qaza as well. Right? So then in that case. And then the third one they mentioned is forgetfulness. On the footnote, that is, this is obviously a person he totally forgot. There's a slightly different masala at the bottom they mentioned after this, which is quite similar. This one is the person totally forgot about his namaz, right? And that he missed Isha, he totally forgot. In the morning he woke up, read Fajr, Zohar, Asr. Then that person obviously become out of forgetfulness, not being aware that he's missed a namaz. Then his Fajr, Zohar will be fine. At the bottom they mention another note. He said, hence, that which one prays. Okay, so he mentioned that if you're Sahib al-Tartib and you've got less than 6 prayers to do, and you have to do them in order, Fajr, then Zohar, then Asr, then Maghrib, right? That person, if he read the next namaz without making the previous ones up, the ones he's reading now, they become invalid. Right? So he missed Fajr and Zohar. Now he woke up and he started reading Asr. His Asr will be invalid. Why? Because he had the time to read the Fajr and Zohar and he missed them. Right? However, if he carried on praying, he knew, I've got 2 namazah to do, and he carried on praying. He read the Asr, Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, Zohar, Asr. Next day Asr came and he read it. Right? Now his prayers will be considered done, but he'll be sinful. Right? For leaving those previous prayers out. That's why I mentioned they kind of suspended, because if he remembers and prays before, then they become nafal. He has to repeat those ones, and if he doesn't remember, he thinks after 1 week, I'll read them now, then that's why he mentioned, they are suspended. They all will be considered. Nevertheless, this is obviously the first part was touching upon people who missed less than 6 namazah. But in most cases, people have more than that. There is no order that you need to read the Qaza namaz in. You can read Qaza namaz in any order possible. Right? For example, you got 1 year of namaz to make up, and you miss them for 1 year, you'll be slacking. There's no fixed order. You know, some people say with every Fajr read a Fajr, with the Zohar read a Zohar. That's the easy way to do it. So after 1 year, you know that you've clocked 1 year of previous one as well, because with every namaz you read an extra one of the same namaz. But if you want to get slowly into it, then you can do all the Fajrs in one go, then do all the Zohars, then all the Asrs, then Maghribs, and then Isha, then the Witrs as well. And you can do that as well. If you want to do, you know, Asr, Fajr to Isha, then Fajr to Isha, Fajr to Isha, that's your own choice. You can go about it any way you want. But this also requires to do tawbah as well and make repentance when you miss namaz. Some people have held the opinion that you don't need to read the Qaza namaz. In the Hanafi school, you pray the Qaza namaz. Others have said that if you've done tawbah, then what's the point of reading the Qaza namaz? Allah accepts your forgiveness and your ghaflat. But a sign of doing tawbah is that you try to make them up. So in the Hanafi school, of course, tawbah is still important. You still need to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for missing a namaz. But making those prayers up as well is also important as well, that you need to do that. So you say it's not necessary in the intention of making up the missed prayer to specify the exact prayer. Rather, it is sufficient to intend a Zuhr or an Isha that one owes. This ruling also applies to fasting. Okay, so there's a difference of opinion on this one. One opinion is that when you read the Qaza namaz, you make the intention that this is the first one I've missed. So you do that all the time. So imagine you missed Monday to Friday, you missed namaz, right? So obviously you've done 5 of each prayer. So when you're doing Qaza, you'll say, this is my first Fajr that I owe, i.e. that'll be the Monday one. Then when you do another Fajr, you'll say, this is the first one I owe. That'll be the Tuesday one, because the first Monday one's already done. So each time you make the intention that this is the first one of this whatever prayer it is I owe, and then you slowly build it up all the way to the ones you're at. But here the author has gone with the opinion, you don't need to specify which namaz it is. Which day's Fajr it is. If you know that you missed 10 Fajr, you just say, Allah, make the intention that I'm reading a Fajr namaz that I owe, Qaza namaz. Allah, start praying. And then do 10 of those with unspecified intentions, but as long as you make the intention for Fajr. They also mention the same thing applies for the fasting. If you got Qaza Rosé to do as well, you just make the intention that this is Qaza of the Rosé I owe. It won't be the 5th of January or the 7th of Ramadan I missed a fast. You don't want to specify it like that. You can just say that this is the Qaza of the Rosa I missed in Ramadan. The next day this is the Qaza of the Rosa I missed in Ramadan, and so on. Okay, next we'll just move on, inshallah.
I've got a question, Asaji. If you're making up your Qaza namaz and you haven't reached the goal that you set for yourself, for example, you missed 1,000 namaz and you completed 900 or 500 or even just one because you made the intention to do them and you die, what happens then?
That's why it's important to make the tawbah, right? Because if you don't do tawbah, you just do qaza and you're not really remorseful. One of the conditions of the ulama, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala in Riyadh Salihin, he writes the 3 sharait, 3 conditions for real tawbah. One is أن يندم على فعلها, that he's sad about what he's done. Sometimes we say astaghfirullah, we say something stupid, we swear, we do a guna, we're not even sad, right? Then that's not real tawbah. One is that you're sad about the action that you've done. So if you miss namaz, you're actually sad that you missed the namaz. Second would be that you make the intention not to do the action again. That I will never ever miss my namaz again, you make that intention. And the third thing is you don't actually do that thing. you stay steadfast in namaz, that's a sign of your tawbah being accepted. Right? The difference between 2 and 3 is one is making a niyat and of not doing it. And one is making or actually not doing it. The difference is that you might only have one chance or one opportunity to do a certain guna. Imagine it's like robbing a car. In your whole life, or you're at a point in your life that you only had one opportunity and you done that guna and you stole the car, for example. After that, you don't get the opportunity to steal anything. You're in a situation, you might be in a prison cell for 10 years, you can't rob anything, and now you died. But if your intention wasn't that that might be the situation that you can't rob anything, but you're thinking, Jilabar exam or steal something, then your tawbah is not done. The intention has to be there that even if I have the opportunity to rob something, I'm not going to rob it. So even if we have the opportunity to backbite, I won't backbite. Even if I have the opportunity to miss namaz, I won't miss namaz. Or miss, like for example, someone says, in Ramadan he missed 5 fasts. And obviously next Ramadan is 11 months away. Right? He could die before that. So when he does tawbah, he makes the intention that I won't do it again. That I will make sure I keep my rosé. And at the same time, he stays away from that. Now in the 11 months, he's got no choice but to stay because the rosé are coming after 11 months. So the niyyah needs to be there that he needs to make the intention. So same with the qaza namaz. He, obviously if he's reading his qaza namaz and he passes away, we leave that in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he done tawbah, he was doing his qaza namaz, and Allah will have mercy on him. As we know, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will pardon him and forgive him for his shortcomings of the namaz he missed. But the person should be constantly reading them, qaza namaz. It shouldn't be that Monday he done 5 qaza, 3 days he never done qaza, then Thursday he done it. Now he's not really sincere in his qaza namaz. He should have had some time, at least 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes to do qaza namaz. So at least he could have done anything. But if he hasn't been doing it, I asked one of our ustads once that if someone has qaza namaz and namaz to make up, but how should he do them? And the answer was simple: any free time he has, he should do qaza namaz. That's how important it is to do the qaza namaz. That any free time you have, you should be trying to do your qaza namaz.
So if, for example, he's completed his whatever or hers namaz, whatever they've missed, after they've completed it, then do they become a sahib tartib?
He won't technically become sahib tartib, but he should try to still follow the procedure for sahib tartib. So because technically he won't, because he's broken that thing for himself. So anyone who is sahib tartib, i.e. in his life he's never missed more than 6 namaz in a go, then that is a maqam, that's like a special rank that person has. Like 11 years old, he became baligh, and from 11 years old, he's never missed more than 6 namazah in a go, right? That is something that you can't, you missed 40 years, you made qaza 40 years, and you're like, chalo, I'm sahib tartib. You won't really get that same rank as them, but it's good to still apply that rule of reading them in tartib. It'll keep you more punctual as well, and it'll keep you more in line. The next dimension here is catching up the Jamaat or reading the Jamaat. So firstly, the mention here is that the narration or the point they mention here is that reading the namaz in Jamaat is 25 times more rewarding. In another narration it mentions it's 27 times more reward to read namaz with Jamaat in the masjid than read on your own. And just general Jamaat as well. So if you're down someone's house, if there's 2 of you, you should do Jamaat basically. That's the rule. If there's 2 people, you should do Jamaat. Father and son at home, you should do Jamaat. If you can't make it to the masjid, you're with one of your friends, you should do Jamaat. And the reward of reading with congregation, that will still be considered Jamaat as well. Even if there's 2 of you, the Imam and the Muqtadi. So you should still do the Jamaat, and the reward will be according to the narration mentioned here, 25 times more, and according to the other narration, 27 times more rewarding. Now, Imagine you went to a masjid and you start reading your Zohar namaz. You thought that the Jamaat is done. You start reading Zohar and the Iqamat happens. Right? What should you do? Or you might be reading your Sultan and you're reading your Sunnahs and the Iqamah happens. What should you do? So you're reading 4 Sunnah for Zohar. You should have looked at the clock first. But you started your 4 Sunnahs and then you're in your first rak'ah. The Iqamat happens for the Farz. You cut off your namaz and you give salam, you end your namaz and you join the Jamaat. This applies and this generally would, you be trying to cut the namaz short other than the 2 sunnahs of Fajr namaz. You read them, and even if the Jamaat has started, if you've got time to read the 2 sunnahs of Fajr, you read those 2 sunnahs and then you join Jamaat. Whereas any other namaz, if the Jamaat has started, you do not come inside and read the sunnahs. You do not read your sunnahs, you go straight for the Jamaat and you join the Jamaat. So it says here, thus if the Jamaat commences after one had already begun the obligatory prayer alone, i.e. he's reading his fard alone, then he should break it with 1 salam while standing and join the Jamaat. Right? So a scenario like I mentioned, you went to the masjid and you start reading your own namaz because you never knew, or you think, you know what, Jamaat might be after a while, I need to get out of here, I need to go somewhere, I need to go to work. You start your Jamaat and next minute they've started the Iqamat in the masjid. You cut off your salah and you join the Jamaat. He said if you have done the first sajda of your 4 rakat, or even if you had performed the first prostration for the prayer that does not have a 4 rakat like Fajr and Maghrib. So it's as long as you have not yet performed. Okay, so if you've done the 1 rakat, obviously you can't pray 1 rakat namaz. So what you do 2 and you cut it off. Right, so that's what it's saying. And if it's Maghrib, and then it said now for Fajr, obviously what will happen? Obviously if you do the second one, then you've done your own Jamaat. So they mention here, i.e. it says here, if one had performed the first prostration for the prayer that do not have 4 rakats, i.e. Fajr and Maghrib namaz. What? 13 minutes, so we'll stop here and then start after. So let's continue from page 102, 103. Then touching the Fard prayer or the Jamaat. So we're just discussing that when you go to the masjid or anywhere, even at home, imagine your siblings or your family members are doing Jamaat at home and you know the Jamaat is going on, or you've started your Sunnah, they started the Jamaat, and what you should do basically. So the first thing they mentioned here was reading namaz with Jamaat, and minimum Jamaat is what, 2 people. So the Imam and 1 follower. The prayer reward is multiplied 27 times, or in one narration 25 times it's multiplied. Then they mentioned that if you started your Fard Salah on your own, and then the Iqamah was recited, so they started reading the Iqamah, what should you do? First thing, if you're in the first rak'ah, you just started, you're still standing up doing Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and the Iqamah is being recited, then you give 1 salam and then you go join them, join the Jamaat. So that's if you started your namaz. If you've started the prayer and you've done 1 prostration, so you've done 1 rakat basically, now what should you do? If it's Fajr, then obviously there's no prayer with 1 rakat, so you read the 2 rakats, that's it. You read, and obviously now you have to finish up on your own. If it's Maghrib, for Fajr and Maghrib, it's based on 2 rakats. So if 1 is done, you still can join the Jamaat, and you give salam and you join the Jamaat. Same with Maghrib. If 1 is done, you give salam and you join the Jamaat. If 2 are done for Fajr, i.e. you're in your first sajda, in the second rakat, you finish up on your own, there's only 2 rakats for Fajr, namaz will finish on its own. Same with Maghrib, because there are 3 rakats. You can't do 2 and leave 1 on its own. Hence, after the 2, you can cut off. After the 2, you have to finish all 3 namaz. All 3 and your salah is done. If you only done 1 rakat for Maghrib, then you can cut it off. Right? And if it's a 4 rakat prayer, after 1, you have to do 2 minimum. You do 2, give salam and you finish, and then you join the Jamaat and you do all 4 with the Jamaat again. If you in a 4 rakat namaz, you've read 3 and then the Jamaat stops. Now, what should you do? You finish up all 4 on your own, your farz is done. Now, you join the Jamaat with the intention of Nafil namaz. So if it's Zohar namaz, you make the intention of Nafil, you join the Jamaat. With Fajr, if you read your own and the Jamaat started straight after you finished, there's no namaz after Fajr farz. So you can't join Nafil, hence you just get off scene. So otherwise people will say, this guy never read the namaz, and people are going to start talking. Then, if you're Zohar, you read your Zohar, and now Jamaat has started, you join the Jamaat with the intention of Nafil. For Asr, because there's nothing after the Fard, same thing as Fajr. You don't join the Jamaat with the intention of Nafil. And for Maghrib, there are no 3 Nafils. You can't do 3 rakat namaz or a 1 rakat namaz. So now, if you've done your Maghrib and then the Jamaat has started, you can't join the Jamaat because they can't do 3 rakat nafil. And then for Isha, if you've done your namaz, because you can't do 4 rakat nafil, then you join the Jamaat and read Isha again with the Imam. But your intention will be nafil. Imam's doing the farz of Isha, you're doing the 4 nafil, extra nafil with the Imam. Basically, that's the summary of the whole thing.
You know, if you break your namaz, give 1 salam, you read your 2 rakat, and then you went at-tahiyat and you're reading it. Which place then do you give your salam? For example, do you read your at-tahiyat all away, then you read your Durood Sharif as normal, and then you give salam?
You give salam after the Ashhadu la ilaha
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
That is like generally, even normally at-tahiyat, right? The minimum requirement which will validate your salah is to read up to Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasul. Anything after that is sunnah. Obviously, omitting the sunnah without valid reason, you are sinful, as is emphasized sunnah. But imagine someone's wuzu is about to break, and if he reads all the way to Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, his wuzu will break, right? If you read the Durood Sharif and the Dua Rabbi Ja'alni. So if he thinks it's about to break, after Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, he can give his salam and end his prayer. And that's the minimum requirement. So in this situation, joining Jamaat will be necessary for him. Right? So now there's a wajib going on, which is necessary for him to, or sunnah mu'akkada to read the Jamaat. And now he has the Durood Sharif and the Dua to read, which is not on the same level as in terms of being a sunnah. So he'll cut off after Ashhadu la ilaha and join the Jamaat.
If you are traveling, for example, before you became a Musafir, you're reading at home, for example, Zohar namaz, and you read your namaz, Zohar namaz, for example, 1 o'clock, and you go into Birmingham or something like that, and Zohar namaz there 2 o'clock, for example, and it takes you 1 hour to get there, and you have to go to a masjid. Can you then join that Jamaat, but as nafil?
Yeah, because they're going to be doing 4 rakats.
Yeah.
And now you're Musafir, you don't need to do 4 when you're traveling, right? You only need to do 2.
Yeah.
But because your farz is already done anyway, now you nafil, there's no restrictions on generally. Even if you're traveling, you can do 1,000 nafil. Right? The limitation or the leniency that Allah has given is with your farz. So if you went in that scenario and you ended up in a different town, you're traveling now, and their Jamaat has started now, then you can read behind the Imam as long as your nafil namaz is allowed at that time. Like after Fajr, Asr is not allowed, after Asr and after the Maghrib, you won't read with another Maghrib with the Imam, right? But so if it's Zohar and Isha, then you can join the Imam with the intention of nafil, that should be fine. And then the bottom part here they mention is, which I already touched upon, that in terms of that if you go to the masjid and the Jamaat has already started, you join the Jamaat. You don't start reading your Sultan first, apart from Fajr Namaz, we mentioned here. And even with your Fajr Namaz, you don't start doing long surahs in your Sunnah. You do the short surahs and you quickly join the Imam. You don't hang around wasting time. Yeah? The next page they mention, so that's straightforward, that first part. So the next part is the Sunnah prayer before the Zohar is made within its prayer time before its 2 rak'ah of Sunnah. Now you came to the masjid, and these ones apply to us generally. You went to the masjid, the Jamaat already started. You missed your 4 Sunnahs out. Right? You came, you thought, I'll go pray my Sunnahs in the masjid. You came, Jamaat started already. Obviously, you have to join the Jamaat. Now your 4 Sunnahs have been missed out. When would you read those 4 Sunnahs? This author has given the opinion that you read it after the Farz but before the Sultan. So after the Zohar, for example, you have 2 Sunnah, 2 Nafil. Before the 2 Sunnahs, so straight after the Farz, you do the 4 Sunnah you missed. Right? The other opinion is that you read the 2 Sunnah and then after the 2 Sunnah you do it. Because the first order is already messed up. You missed it, you started your Farz, so you missed the order from the start of the namaz. Now, after the prayer, it follows you 2 Sultan. If you put the 4 Sunnah there, you mess the next order up as well. Right? So, but both opinions are sound, both are valid. Either way, if you do it, if you read your 4 Sunnah that you missed, you read them first and then read your 2 Sunnah, it's fine. If you read your 2 Sunnah first and then the 4 you missed, either way, it's fine. So they also mention here the next thing now. How do you get the reward of reading namaz with Jamaat? Is it you have to start right at the starting, make the first rakat, make the takbir? Which part do you have to join to get the reward of 27 times more? As long as you join in the attahiyat, even in the 4th sitting, you met the imam, you walked in, they're about to finish and the imam is reading, with the shahud at the end of tahiyat, and you join that part, you've got the reward of the Jamaat. As long as you join the imam in any rakat, basically, you have the reward of reading with congregation with the Jamaat. And they just mentioned a sign over here that you can read Nafil namaz before the Fard namaz as long as you don't delay the Fard to the point that you're going to miss it. Right? So before Zohar you start reading Nafil namaz, praying Nafil all the way, and now it's nearly Asr time. You haven't read your Fard, and that shouldn't be done. But generally you can read Nafil namaz as much as you want. This is an important one, very to keep in mind. That if you're inside the masjid and the azan happens, now you wait for the Jamaat. You should not leave the mosque and you should read the namaz with Jamaat. This is something a lot of people don't know. That if you're inside the masjid, like for example, I went to Al-Hira Masjid and to drop something off, right? And I went there and the Jamaat stopped, the azan happened whilst I was present. Now, unless I have a valid reason, I am not allowed to leave the mosque. I read with Jamaat, and normally, generally here in the UK, I know the trend is the azan happens 10 or 15 minutes before the Jamaat. No one does it like 1 hour, 2 hours before. But so here it's quite easy. You wait that 10-15 minutes and then you read the namaz with the Jamaat and then you leave. A valid reason would be, like again my example, I have to leave the namaz here. So now I can leave that mosque and come to this one and lead the prayer. But if you're free and you got nothing to do and the azan happens while you're there, you need to read the namaz in the mosque and you shouldn't leave the mosque. So if you're going home and you know the muazzin is about to give the azan and you don't want to be tied down here, then either you request the muazzin, wait 1 minute, let me go. Or, now that can happen, right? I've done that a few times myself when I had to leave for Birmingham a few times. And then had some, I've requested them to just wait 1 minute, let me go home first, and then he give you azan. That can happen, obviously, but if he gave it and I'm here, then I should realistically wait, and unless I have a valid reason. Let's see what they mentioned here. One they mentioned here, you can leave if you made the intention that you're going to come back. So you just go to the shop and you'll be back for the Jamaat. That's one reason they mentioned that you can leave. If you're going to read the namaz somewhere else, or you have a class to attend, right? So if you have a class in this masjid and you were in the central masjid, azan happened, you know, chalo Jamaat and class can happen there, you can leave and make it for this masjid. Or if you think that this is my only opportunity to make it for the sabbath, I'm going to miss my sabbath, and then you're allowed to leave that masjid and come to your class to seek knowledge. Another one they mentioned is, like I already touched on, if you're imam somewhere else. And they're just going to extra know, why if you already read it on your own and then the azan happens? Right? So if you already prayed on your own, then the azan happens, then it's straightforward. Obviously you already prayed, you can leave. And so that's something extra that they mentioned here. Another thing that, you know, which it says here, which I remember from this, where as he would have responded once to the call to prayer. There's something that, as a side note, which I remember about azan. You know, the ruling for azan is that when the azan is being recited, that you copy after the muazzin, and i.e. you affirm what he's saying, and then you head towards the namaz, right? If you're already in the masjid, you're already considering that you responded to the azan by being present for the Jamaat. So you came and you attended the Jamaat, or you came to read the namaz with Jamaat, and then the azan happened, and that is one type of confirmation. So even if you, for example, we're sitting in a lesson now, azan starts happening, you being in this lesson and knowing that you're going to read namaz with Jamaat, you've been here for that reason, is a confirmation. So if I carry on teaching you why the azan is happening in the background, that wouldn't be an issue in that sense, right? So, but obviously generally, out of adab, and to maintain the habit of answering the adhan, going quiet when the adhan is happening, and then you basically should stop what you're doing and reply to the adhan. Another form of replying, so one is verbally replying to the azan, one is physically replying to the azan. Now, for example, you live next door, like I can hear the azan from home, right? And so when the azan happens and I think, oh, we're late for namaz, I'm not answering the azan, but I've got up to do wuzu. Now when I'm going to do my wudu, that is me physically responding to the azan, right? Otherwise, if I just waited the 5 minutes, then I might be late for the Jamaat. So either you verbally respond, if you're present, you're available, you can hear the adhan, or you physically respond to the adhan by getting up and heading towards the masjid. And so the whole purpose when they say reply to the azan is I make your way to the namaz. And so it doesn't mean that you hear the azan, you answer the azan, and then you miss the Jamaat as well. Yeah? Answering the azan would be that you make your way to the namaz if you are able to do so. Or if you're not, then you pray with the people who you are with, where you are. Another thing they mentioned here, they're just touching on a few random masail connected with this chapter, is that if you read a fardh prayer, you do not read the fardh namaz again. Right? You don't pray any fardh prayer after you have prayed it. So they mention here, if one joins the Jamaat while the Imam is in ruku, says his tahrima, and then remains standing until the Imam raises his head, he did not catch the rakat of the prayer. So what is the cut-off point for the rakat? So a lot of people think it's the sajda. It's not the sajda. It's the ruku is the cut-off point. So if the Imam stands up from ruku, you miss the rakat. Right, so you came in and the Imam was in Ruku. If you joined him in Ruku, you joined the first rakat. If you stood up from Ruku or he was in the first sajda, you missed that rakat out. Even though you made it to after the Ruku, you made it the first sajda, the second sajda, the whole rakat is missed. So you have to make up that one rakat again. So same scenario, obviously if he came in and he was in his third rakat and he stood up, now you have to make 3 up. If you caught him in the Ruku, you only have to make 2 up. So the cut-off point for missing a rakat is the Ruku. Another one they mention here is, some people are a bit tawli, right, in namaz, that they know like the Imam is reading Qul Allah, that's like Qul Allah, Allah samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan. He gets up to there and the person following is like Allah Akbar, he goes into Ruku. Because naturally he expects that obviously the Imam is going to go to Ruku. The Imam hasn't even finished the last Ruku for one ahad and he jumps into Ruku. That happens a lot of times with people, right? Then if he does that, he remains in Ruku until and waits for the Imam. And then he's with the Imam. If he stands up before the Imam goes down, then he's messed up. Then he's missed that rakat with the Imam. Right? So he should wait. If he's gone down, he stays in Ruku and keeps waiting for the Imam, and then the Imam will catch him up, inshallah. So it says if the follower bows before his Imam, yet after the Imam had recited the minimum obligatory, then the Imam catches him, the follower in bowing, okay, that's fine. Yeah, so the same thing as I just mentioned here, that if you catch up with the Imam, or the Imam catches up with you in that case, right, then your Imam is valid. If the Imam can't catch you up, then obviously you're not with the Imam, and your salah is invalid. Inshallah, we can stop here. We'll do a chapter at a time. Any questions on this?
Let's say I've seen people, if he gives salam before the Imam gives salam, I've seen the Imam say
No, as long as the Imam has given the salam, right, then even if he hasn't turned his head, right, as long as he's verbally given the salam, turning your head is sunnah. So saying the salam to your exit, that is wajib. So if the Imam says as-salam, if he started and he said, and then the person gives salam before, I'm guessing what you mean is they turn their head before the Imam. Then the Imam says as-salam, and the Imam gets halfway and that guy's ready, 2 salams done. And when I finishing my second one off, I can see people, sorting the kapre and that's how quick they be, right? So generally, as long as the Imam has already given the salam, and then they just really quicker than him. Like imagine the Imam is going to Ruku, right? And he says Allahu Akbar, and the Imam's Rahman are going to Ruku, relax, and a young guy behind him is quickly goes into Ruku. It wouldn't be that he done it before the Imam. Obviously, he went on the count of the Imam, but he just did it faster and got there before the Imam could get there. But as long as he doesn't actually give the salam before the Imam. Right? So the Imam hasn't even said Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. He's thinking the Imam's going to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Then the Imam says it. So he left his namaz before the Imam even left it. Right? So that shouldn't be the case. But I'm guessing what you're referring to, generally what people do is they hear the Imam say the words, but then they rush the action themselves and then they beat the Imam in the physical, right? Same with that, for example, Imam is going down the sajda, he's like, Allah, and a youngster, like sometimes I be, half down, and all I can hear knees going bang, bang, bang. So people are diving down into sajda before I can even go halfway down. So that generally, that wouldn't really be of any issue, as long as they were on my count.
Generally, let's say you join the mosque third report or like fourth report, do you put your in your tahiyyat position? Do you still read it, or do you not read anything else here?
No, you still read the tashahhud.
Or even if, like, let's say you still
Yeah. So you still do the minimum of tahiyyat.
and you
Yeah. generally in any city, any Qa'dah, the minimum recitation that you need to do is up to Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Even if you join the rakat and that your first time sitting down, you should still, because you're considered to have read the shahud. Now you're abandoning a wajib of a namaz without a valid reason. Right? So generally, in terms of like reading behind the imam, as a side note, is that you read everything behind the imam, apart from the surah Fatiha and the surah after it. Right? So Allahu Akbar, all the takbeers you're going to do. The first takbir al-tahrima or the takbir intiqal, which is changing between the positions, all of these you decide. The At-Tahiyyat, Durood Sharif, Rabbi Jani, you will read all these as well. The only thing you don't recite in the Hanafi school behind the Imam is the Surah Fatiha and any Surah. Right? Because there is a hadith in which he mentions that when the Quran is being recited, then you listen to it first thing. Sometimes, I experience this myself. I'm like, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, and I can hear people going back, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Then I'm following the ayah of the Quran which says, at least when the Quran is being recited, listen to the Quran. Right? So that's one ayah of the Quran. And another one, a hadith that mentions that the Imam's recitation is your recitation. And that refers to the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Yeah? But there's a third hadith, another hadith which says, without Surah Al-Fatiha there is no namaz. Right? So they use that and they say, look, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you don't read Surah Fatiha, your namaz doesn't happen. That is correct, yes, if you're praying alone and you didn't read Surah Fatiha. That is correct. But if you're behind the Imam, then you reconcile between the two hadiths. You use both of them. Okay, one says behind the Imam, one says when you're behind the Imam, his recitation is your recitation. And the other one says without Surah Fatiha, there is no namaz. So in the Hanafi school, what do we say? Surah Fatiha is wajib. So if you're on your own, you haven't read Surah Fatiha, your salah is invalid. But if you're with the Imam, then his recitation is your recitation. So you're using both hadiths, but just in different times and scenarios. This is the beauty of following the Imams. Any school that you follow, if you follow the Shafi, Hanbali, Maliki school, that they've done their research, they've told you in different methods and ways how to implement various hadiths. So it's not simple as you grab a hadith and you start reading and according to that hadith. Because there'll be a scenario where the hadith fits. There'll be a situation where the hadith fits. And like I just mentioned now, that without Surah Fatiha there's no namaz. Okay, that is true. But at the same time, there's another hadith that says the Imam's reading is yours. So when you're in Jamaat, you don't read Surah Fatiha. Why? Because the Imam is doing the job for you. Even if the namaz is loud or quiet. So like from Zuhr namaz, the Imam doesn't read loud. You just stay quiet. You don't need to recite still. Right? And you just reflect and ponder about being the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and contemplate about even just thinking about Surah Fatiha in your mind. The restriction is on the reading part. The thinking of Surah Fatiha in your mind, there's no restriction on that. So what would you do? Obviously you think about the Surah Fatiha and it'll be playing in your mind and you'll be pondering about the meaning and translation and the lessons and whatever you can take from Surah Al-Fatiha. But it doesn't mean that you stand there idle daydreaming. Yeah. So the recitation has a restriction on it, not the tafakkur, pondering and reflecting on the surahs.
We went to Umrah, and some people, it was Tarawih time. We were reading Tarawih behind the Imam, and some individuals, they were holding the Quran Sharif and they were reading with the Imam.
In the Hanafi school, right?
Is this the Shafi school?
Yeah. So in the Shafi school, that won't be considered an action that breaks namaz.
The Hanafi school.
So Hanafi school, I don't know if someone does it. I don't know how they would do it. How would they change the pages without moving, moving so much to the extent that someone thinks you're not even reading namaz. Because in the Hanafi school, the opinion is that if someone sees you doing something and they think you're not praying, most likely you're doing a major move. So now if your Quran's there and you're holding, how are you supposed to change pages? Obviously you can use the other hand, right? So then in the Hanafi school, that we consider a major movement which would break the salah. Whereas I know in the Shafi school, in the ulama, the mashayikh, they do use Qur'ans, and some places when Taraweeh happens, people, even the Muqtadi, the follower, he's following the Taraweeh on his Qur'an, and they're reading behind the Imam like this, and they're looking at the Qur'an. But in the Hanafi school, that does not apply. So that most likely that will lead to a major movement which will break the namaz. Similarly, like carrying a child. Right? There's ikhtilaf on these, but most cases you're going to make such a movement, picking up a child up, in the namaz, in the Hanafi school, that most likely you're going to end up breaking the salah. Right? So these things should be avoided.
So whilst you're reading namaz, and if you want to have more like contemplating of what the Imam is reading, can you close your eyes?
Yeah. Sometimes in your Hanafi text you might see that it says closing your eyes and reading namaz is makruh. But if it helps you to focus and reflect on the ayahs and is benefiting your prayer, then it's not makruh. But one of the reasons and the makruh aspect generally would be that if you kept your eyes closed all the way through the namaz. Now when you go to ruku and sajda, by the time you get up, you're facing here, you don't want rakat, you're going to be facing over there, right? So, even if you just change position like this with your eyes closed, you might end up in a different direction. Never mind going all the way down and standing back up. So that's one of the reasons why it's considered makruh to pray with your eyes closed. But if it just means that you're keeping your eyes open the whole way through, but just while the Imam is reciting, and instead of being distracted by the people around you or whatever, you close your eyes just to contemplate, then it won't be makruh in that sense, to close your eyes and read numbers. So inshallah we'll call it a day here. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.